Graeme, what does reconciliation mean to you?
Well, there's two terms, two ways of looking at it. First of all, there is the reconciliation process which the country is going through. But prior to that, of course, reconciliation has its own meaning within as a religious term, a church term. And that would mean virtually it's a process where people have realised that there's been a breakdown in relationships, and there is this process that's put into place to try and bring things back into balance. And the process, very simply, is that there has to be a recognition that something has gone wrong. And then from there, there is a public acknowledgement of that, and then there's an acceptance by the people who were wronged. And also then, but there is this area of penance, as we used to call it, probably still call it, or restitution that needs to take place. Some sort of act that helps the process along and sort of seals the process. If we look at the way it's used within the reconciliation movement, that last area, the area of compensation or restitution or penance, really hasn't been dealt with too well within the whole process. There's been to some degree an acknowledgement that things were going wrong, and in some cases that's been done publicly, but some of it's been done half-heartedly and therefore has not been quite accepted by a lot of Aboriginal people. But definitely the last area about restitution hasn't been handled at all.
So how far did the apology go in that way? What did the apology do, and what else needs to be done?
Well, firstly, the apology is that happened in February 2008 was aimed at the stolen generation, those who were taken away, which is one aspect of Aboriginal lives that needed to be addressed, and an apology was very much welcomed by the vast majority of Aboriginal people. But again, still there's a whole area, the last part still hasn't been addressed, the whole area of restitution or penance in any way, and that needs to be sorted out.
Why do you think many people were unhappy to begin with the idea of an apology? Why do you think that the truth of what's happened in this country has not been received by everybody?
Well, I think there is to actually stand up and to be able to acknowledge that something has gone wrong sends I suppose a shudder through the society that they were either partly to blame for it, or that they were received something out of it, whether it be land or whether it be through unpaid wages, that people got cheap labour on these places, or that they were able to use domestic staff cheaply and so on. So I think underneath, I think that a lot of people do realise that something went wrong, but to own up to it means that they'd have to realise that they are partly to blame in all this. And people will say, well, that all lies in the past, but actually a lot of modern Australians do still benefit from the point of view from all those things that took place in the past. One of them, of course, is that they are all living in a place that doesn't belong to them. It was a land that was stolen, and there's never been any compensation given to Aboriginal people. They may say, yes, native title, we've given them native title. Well, they didn't give it to us. Native title actually did exist prior to the coming of the white people, but you know, there's still I suppose there's still guilt there that they have to own up to, and of course with guilt comes a lot of shame, and they don't want to get involved in all that.
So all this business of reconciliation is about dealing with sin and shame, not just on a personal level, and churches talk about original sin. Is there such a thing as Australia's original sin?
Yeah, there is, definitely. It is Australia's original sin that the land was taken without any sort of compensation or without any sort of negotiation with Aboriginal people. And there was no compensation that was given to them for their loss. Therefore, really, the land still belongs to a lot of Aboriginal people, and it's a continual fight that Aboriginal people have with the newcomers, in that they still believe that they own the land. That question of sovereignty has never been answered for Aboriginal people, and until that is answered, then that'll always keep coming up and will always remain as a stain on our society, which needs to always be addressed.
So what the churches have done some recognition, they've done some work with Indigenous people and supported Indigenous Christians. What more can they do?
Well, I think churches, first of all, have to realise that they are part of the Western culture. They may think that they're not, that they are above culture, but in actual fact the church that we do have, or the churches that we do have here in Australia, are very much part of their cultures. And of course the Western churches still hold very dearly to their Western culture. And therefore they have to rethink their Christianity in the sense of, well, what are the basic areas that really that aren't connected with culture, and how can that play out better in a country like Australia? And of course the other thing that is important is that there is a rich culture that is already here in this country, the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander culture, that needs to be drawn on for the church really to blossom into the really Australian church that's needed. So there's plenty of things for them to begin to reflect upon, not just reflecting upon story and in ceremony, but there's also a shift in power in this, in that they have to give up some of their long-held, some 2,000 years, beliefs in their church to be able to embrace a long-held belief of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people of some 40,000, 100,000 years.
Thank you.